Well, it's finally stopped sleeting, raining, snowing, well, at least for today. But I'm thinking back on my cruise from downtown Hampton, Virginia to the Sailing Emporium in Rock Hall, Maryland in mid-November of 2013. It was a great cruise. My first plan, though, was to leave the boat in Portsmouth, Virginia for the holidays, but due to some of the family obligations and some upgrades I had planned for the boat, it just made more sense to go back to the Sailing Emporium. Well, downtown Hampton is definitely a destination you should put on your cruising list. It's easy in and out, and the public piers at downtown Hampton are great. Plus, you're close to all the sites and activities downtown Hampton has to offer. Well, during my stay, there were a lot of small craft advisories, so I was lucky that on Friday when I planned on leaving, the winds had died down and calmed down a little bit. The forecast was for southwest winds 15 to 20 knots and waves 2 to 3 feet. Not too bad. Now, I've come to the conclusion, though, that it's better to depart early in the morning and arrive at your destination port in the daylight. Primary reason is that once you get into your destination, now you have recent knowledge of the best way to get back out. And with the track function enabled on your GPS, you have a relatively safe course to follow when you depart. Now, the Hampton Roads area is very busy, so I highly advise to navigate outside the main shipping lanes, especially in the dark. Now, I departed at 3:30 in the morning to have the tide with me on my way to Deltaville. Now, as I entered the main portion of the bay, I got a call on the VHF from someone. I'm thinking it's a VA pilot probably. You know, eastbound motor sailor near Fort Monroe, what's your intended track? I came back with, well, I'm turning to port momentarily. And the guy comes on and says, well, I just want to make sure you're aware that you have a shipping vessel headed north just behind you. There's another shipping vessel coming in from the ocean and a tug with a barge coming south. And in about 10 minutes, that's going to be a very dangerous area for you. I would highly advise turning earlier rather than later. Well, I thanked him and I made my turn at once. And within about 5 minutes, the dark was lit up with all sorts of lights from these ships. I mean, it was confusing. Plus, in the dark, you can't see these 3-foot wakes that these ships are producing as they slam alongside the vessel, plus the 2 to 3 foot waves of the bay. Now, the good thing is this area is deep with few obstructions. So if you do get knocked off course a little bit, it's not a major consequence. It is a little nerve-wracking, especially for someone like me who's relatively new to sailing, and especially at night and in the dark. Well, as the sun came up, I was able to raise the main. I had reefed it the day before because I knew the winds were still going to be a little high for me. Well, sailing was a little difficult because my autopilot had given out, so I was a slave to the tiller. This made tacking very challenging because I don't have self-trailing winches either. Anyway, I got there. The rest of the cruise was easy, and I got into Deltaville and the Rappahannock side, Broad Creek, with no trouble. Now, I stay at Norton's Marina. I know Carolyn and Ken, the owners, and it's always nice to see old friends. Now, Norton's is much more than just a marina. They're one of the top Marlow hunter dealers on the East Coast, maybe the nation. They've got a large charter fleet and a full-service yacht yard. They also have ASA Sailing School, so they can handle all your sailing needs and desires. And if you need a place to stay while you're ashore, or if you're taking sailing lessons, I recommend Deltaville Inn. The owners, David and Julia Lee, are also friends, and Julia is a gourmet pastry chef. And the breakfasts are like a broken drum. You can't beat them. It's the best I've ever had. And one of the best attractions, though, in Deltaville is the Maritime Museum. Now, they're undergoing a massive renovation and rebuilding after a fire destroyed the original museum several years ago. I would highly recommend a visit to Deltaville just to visit the Maritime Museum. Well, there's a lot of other things to do too, but the Maritime Museum is a key attraction. Now, I departed Norton's the next day about 3 a.m. for my next port, which was Solomon's Island in Calvert Marina. The weather forecast was winds out of the southeast, 10 knots, switching over to the north in the afternoon. So I did wind up motoring most of the way. And I'm glad I was heading north with the tide and the winds when I approached the Potomac River. There were good 3 to 4 foot swells on my stern. And in the past, I had to fight these waves heading south one time. I was lucky to be going 2 knots. Another time, I was going 1 knot and the GPS showed me going backwards. I think the key here is I've got to get further east when you get close to the Potomac. I think that'll help. I don't know, but I'm going to try it next time. Now, when entering Solomon's, be aware of the fish trap areas. Now, they're marked on the charts, but they do seem to kind of move around a little bit. Plus, this can be a heavy crab pot area. This is where having the tracking function on the GPS really helps, especially when you're departing in the dark. Now, Calvert Marina is huge. It occupies most of the east side of Back Creek. You know, at one time it was part of the naval base. As you walk around, you can still see parts of the sidewalks and foundations of some of the buildings. It's really a neat facility. They've got a swimming pool, plenty of open space, picnic areas, a fuel dock, a boatyard, and fantastic sunsets. Well, this is also home to the On the Watch statue in honor of the 68,000 plus troops that were trained here during World War II before being shipped out to either the European or the Pacific theater of war. Well, Calvert Marina is also well protected from the winds and the waves coming off the bay. The marina is a mix of floating and fixed piers with deep water. There's a restaurant and cafe on site, and the Solomon's Town Center is an easy bicycle ride. And for transients, there's a courtesy car to use for reprovisioning. Well, my final leg of the voyage was the Sailing Emporium in Rock Hall. The weather forecast was for AM rain and fog and winds from the north at about 5 knots. Well, I departed Calvert Marina around 4 a.m. in the rain, and it rained until noon with light to no winds, so I motored the entire trip. And without an autopilot, this made for a long cruise, as I had to stay at the tiller the whole time. The fog stayed around most of the day. When I approached the Bay Bridge, I could barely see it. But I did get a glimpse of a tall ship. I don't know which one. It was white, so it kind of looked like a ghost ship in the mist and the fog. It was really kind of a neat experience to see that. Well, I arrived at the Sailing Emporium with plenty of daylight. I was happy to be back in a familiar port. Each leg of the voyage was around 12 hours. And each leg had its own challenges. And without the autopilot, it made it for very long days. I'm definitely going to get another autopilot before the season starts again. But I guess that's all part of the adventure. Overall, it was very enjoyable, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming boating season. So happy and safe boating to you, your family, and friends.